Well, good to see you guys this morning. We are in a series, Pastor Paul kind of led off last week about a series on rest. And kind of rest for your mind, rest for your soul. I'm going to kind of tackle that a little bit today. But before I do, I have a confession to make to you guys, if that's okay. So oftentimes for me, the the most stressful, anxious part of a service is when we go around and do the Thanksgivings, because I never know what's going to happen. I'm anxious. I don't know what someone's going to say. But if I could say, though, it's turned out to be my favorite part of the entire service because it just helps put things into perspective. It helps, like, yeah, we thank God that someone gave their life to Jesus. Thank God people have been inviting their friends to church and they're here. We thank God for all sorts of different things. And it just helps like refocus our minds on what's most important. So while it at times it's been like just kind of the way that I'm wired, like I've just felt like, oh gosh, well, what is somebody gonna say? Is this gonna get awkward? But now it's turned into, man, this is probably the most joyous part of the whole service. So I want to thank you guys for that. Also, to give you guys a glimpse into kind of my mind and my heart and my soul, this past Friday was obviously Valentine's Day. And my wife comes up to me a couple days before Valentine's Day and she says, I got something fun that we're going to do on that day is we're going to go to Target together. Yeah. I'm like, that sounds fun to you. Like you get to go to your most favorite place on earth. Like that sounds awesome. That sounds miserable to me. And but she says, but here's what we're gonna do. I have a list of things that we're gonna buy for each other while we're there. Once we go there, we're gonna go our separate ways and we're gonna buy a list of things for each other. It's gonna be really, really fun. She says, we'll buy each other our favorite candy, our favorite snack, something that reminds us of one another, something that's our favorite color, something that's cozy and comfortable. That's what we're gonna do. Doesn't that sound fun? And I said, this sounds like a trap to me. I mean, this was the most stressful experience of my entire life. I'm like, I can't sleep, the night before Valentine's Day. I'm just thinking, like, does Target even have her favorite candy? What is her favorite snack? Does she even like to snack anymore? I'm not sure. What do I need to do? What? Orange. Oh, thank you. Hello? Whoa. All right, let's go. So we're like preparing for this thing at Target, and like I said, I'm just filled with anxiety and worry and stress. Like and then I get there, and another thing is we're supposed to buy each other's favorite drink. I don't see her favorite drink anywhere. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be tough because that was the one thing that I knew, and they don't even have that. They don't have her favorite candy, and it was just like I was there for like an hour, and my wife got done in like 10 minutes. Okay, but it's just like stressing me out. And we get back in the car and we go home and we're supposed to unpack everything that we got for each other when we get home. And I'm just so nervous, filled with anxiety. And then it winds up being this great thing. Like the first thing is like our favorite candy. I got her junior mints. I love junior mints. Thank you. This is awesome. Then the favorite snack, that one didn't go super great, but we got through that one. Then it was like something comfy and cozy and all these sorts of things. And it wound up like I had all this anxiety and all this worry in my mind going into it. And it wound up being a great thing. Has that ever happened to you before? Where you feel this stress or this worry or this anxiety before something that you're about to go into, thinking for sure it's going to turn out a certain way, and it winds up not turning out the crazy, horrible way that you thought it would. Does that ever happen to you? Like I've heard it said that about 90% of the things that we worry about never actually happen. But that gives you a little glimpse just into my mind. Like my mind is always racing, always running. I don't have a whole lot of rest often in my mind. And kind of like what Paul shared last week, Matthew chapter 11, kind of in verse 28. This is kind of one of our key verses during this series. This is Jesus talking. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke or take my way of life upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke or my way of life is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. So throughout the Bible, in the life of Jesus, rest is captured in a few different ways. It's captured through like Sabbath, It's captured even through fasting or communion, what we're going to do here in a little bit as well. It's captured even through community. It's captured through silence and solitude. But no matter where you are on your journey to find rest for your mind and for your heart and your soul, I really believe that what we discussed today could be one of maybe the biggest steps to set you up on a trajectory in your life to truly find rest for your heart and for your mind and for your soul. So to start out, in Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, it says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world or of the society and the culture that we live in, but let God transform you into a new person, and notice this, by changing the way you think. That's how. By changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, what is good and pleasing and perfect. Meaning our thinking, the way we think, the restless thoughts that go into our minds constantly, how we do that, we are all being transformed by something, whether we realize it or not. And Paul is pleading with the Roman church to let God form and mold the way they think about things. Not change your personality, not change your gifts, not change your abilities, not change your strengths, but I want you to change the way that you think and how you view the world. And if I'm honest, that rubs me the wrong way. I don't like people telling me how I'm supposed to think. I don't like people telling me how I'm supposed to view things. I don't like that. I'm a 21st century American. I think the way that I want to think. I could tell you how to think, but no one tells me how to think, right? That's 21st century American culture, and that was first century Roman culture as well. I think however I want to think. No one tells me how I'm supposed to think, which is odd, because we live in a formation machine. As soon as we wake up in the morning, we begin being shaped and molded and transformed to think how whatever we give our attention to wants us to think every single day. And Paul's like, well, hey, I want you to learn God's way. I want you to learn what's good and pleasing and restful and perfect. There's a connection between how we think and how truly restful our mind and soul and emotions really are. There's a relationship between our thinking and our feeling and our emotions and our living. You see, the opposite of rest is not awake, but the opposite of rest is fatigue. It's an emotional, mental state of exhaustion. It's panic. It's frustration. It's worry. It's anxiety. Do you ever feel that way? Especially lately. But our thinking and feeling are connected. And Jesus said the greatest commandment in the entire Bible is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Meaning we can worship God simply by thinking, by allowing our thoughts to be transformed by what God wants us to think about. What is your mind like? What is my mind like? What kind of character or characteristics is it producing? See, Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7 reads this. It says, as a person thinks in his heart, so is he. Or it's like what FDR once said, men are not prisoners of fate, but are prisoners of their own minds. How true is that? And I know this all too well, because I've felt that. Like I've said, a part of the way I'm wired is I'm always kind of thinking, always processing, always wondering about things. Like my wife will say something to me sometimes, and she'll say, what do you think about that? And I'll sit there for 5 seconds. She'll say, what do you think about it? I'm like, well, I'm thinking, okay? That's what, hold on. It's just going to take me a little bit of time to kind of process this. And that's not all bad. But sometimes it leads to this mental exhaustion and unrest where my mind is just always spinning out of control. Do you ever feel that way? Or I think of the words in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, starting in verse 3. Here's what Paul writes to the church at Corinth. He says, for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds.
We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. See, Paul says there are strongholds in our minds. Now, this term strongholds in Greek was actually used for these like military castles that were dug into the side of mountains that were unpenetrable. Paul is saying that there are strongholds in your mind that feel like they're unpenetrable, that you can't even get there. What Paul calls strongholds, modern psychologists actually call neural pathways. It's when you repeat these thoughts or actions or reactions over and over and over again, where there's like this trigger, something happens and your mind just immediately goes there. Or your reaction just immediately gets triggered to think something or to do something immediately. Like, and it could be good or bad. Like, optimists have neural pathways. Optimists are those like something bad happens. Oh, it's fine. It's going to be okay. It's not that big of a deal. It could have been worse. Look at the bright side of things. And we all love optimists, and they're great, but also at the same time, we can't stand those people sometimes because we think they're delusional, right? And then pessimists have neural pathways. Something good happens. Oh yeah, that might seem good, but did you see the bad stuff that happened in that too? And they just want to point out the negative and the bad things of that. Every single time they're just triggered to react a certain way to think of the bad. And then there's people who call themselves realists, who I've learned that realists are just pessimists who try to make themselves feel better about themselves. And we all know these people. It's like, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist, okay? No, you're a pessimist, you're just trying to make yourself feel better by calling yourself a realist. But here's the thing, for better or for worse, it's now proven that people can actually change their neural pathways, can change the strongholds in their mind. See, psychologists have recently discovered something called neuroplasticity. So the theory used to be that once you reach a certain age, you are who you are, you think how you think, you react how you react, and nothing can actually change that. However, neuroplasticity scientifically proves that's wrong, that humans can change the way they think, can rewire their brains to be less anxious, feel more at peace, to feel more at rest, to feel more joy. They can do that, which sounds great, but how do we do that exactly? So real quick, before we get there, I just want to highlight what's contributed to this epidemic of our minds kind of spiraling out of control. It's no secret that we live today in the most mentally and emotionally unhealthy era that we have ever lived in. This is a regression, not a progression. We are regressing in mental and emotional health quicker and faster than we ever have. So how have we gotten there? I just want to mention two thoughts real quick, and then we'll move on. First one is this. First one is our habits. Meaning what we do on a regular basis is what we think about, and it's what we become. Meaning the things that we do, the things we give our attention to, they actually do something to us. Like what we focus on, what we spend our money on, what we consume, what we watch, what we read, who we spend time with, what we can't go without. It shapes what we love, what we're passionate about. It's what shapes our anxiety, what shapes what we think about things, all of that. Like I recently quit a harmful habit that was spinning my mind out of control. Every night before I'd go to bed, I'd go to YouTube, and I would look up different clips, like 5-minute clips of different news outlets to find out what the news is like today. That's what I would do every night before I'd go to bed. I did this for like 3 weeks. So I'd click, I'd see, okay, here's a CNN panel talking about this hot button news topic. Let's watch that. Huh, interesting. Oh, here's a Fox News panel discussing a latest hot button topic. Let's watch that. Interesting. Now I'm confused. Let's watch more. Okay, this person tells me if I think this way, then I need to be against those people, but yet this person tells me if I think this way, then I'm right and I should be against those people. And then both people tell me no matter what you think about it, it's actually worse than you actually think. Huh, Well, let's go to bed now. And I can't sleep. My mind is spinning out of control, wondering what in the world is even true and what in the world is even right. I don't even know how to think or feel about this. Now I can't sleep. Now I wake up and I'm exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, just exhausted, living my life with just all this uncertainty. You see, 30 years ago, news outlets simply delivered the news. Do you guys remember this time? That you'd like come home after work, you'd eat dinner, and then the 6 o'clock news would come on for 30 minutes. And they would just say, here's the news. Okay. And then you'd be done. And then you'd hang out with your family for 30 minutes, you'd play a game, and then at 7 o'clock, Full House would come on, or Family Matters, okay? Those were the days. It was fantastic. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, and I feel sorry for you. But it was great. But then if you missed the 6 o'clock news, then the 10 o'clock news would come on. For 30 minutes, it's there, and then it's over, and you go to bed, and that's it. But now, news is a 24-hour entertainment cycle, where they don't just tell you the news, but they tell you how you should think about the news, how you should feel about the news. Let's get all these other people around and let's have them share what you should feel and think about the news as well. Let's get people as angry as they possibly can, as worried as they can get, filled with as much anxiety as they can get, spinning their minds out of control. The news is no longer the news. It is now an entertainment business. And if I could be fully blunt, it is ruining people's lives. Okay, since that went so well, let's move forward. But I simply had to shut it off. It's not helpful. It's not contributing to God's pleasing and perfect will for me. It wasn't giving rest for my soul. But the things we do daily, what we consume, what we give our attention to, have the ability to transform us into mentally fatigued people. Second one is this, is our relationships. Or maybe I should say the people who we allow to influence us. And this is something that we all know to be true. Like, we tend to think like the people who we spend the most time with. Odds are we think like the people who we have allowed to influence us. We vote like them, we dress like them, we participate in the same activities as them. The people who have our attention shape the way that we think about things. It's why we tend to surround ourselves with people just like us. It's like we hang out with people, they parent like us, they think like us, they vote like us, they look like us. Why do I like these people so much? Oh, because they're just like me. And they affirm everything that I believe. This is fantastic. I love hanging out with these people. But it's why, also, if you want to get a review for a restaurant, you ask someone who you trust that has been to that restaurant, what do you think about that restaurant? Or if you're about to go on a vacation and you know someone and you trust someone who's been on that vacation and you trust their opinions about that vacation, you ask them, what do you think about this vacation? You tell me, because I'm giving you influence over how I'm going to feel about something. And there's not always something wrong with that, of course. But not only that, but as our friends or the people who we respect react to something, we tend to follow their reactions as well. Like, we get upset and anxious about stuff just because someone who we know and we like and respect gets upset and anxious about something. Like, how many times have we heard someone say, hey, did you hear? And then whatever it is that they say next, you could tell that they're triggered, they're anxious, they're worried, they feel like we need to react a certain way. So because they said it, we react a certain way. And now we're ticked off about something that we know very little about. You're right. I need to be anxious and upset about that too. Man, I don't even really know what you said, but because you're upset, I'm upset about it now too. Like, people want their negative thoughts about someone or something justified and validated, and will do whatever they can to rally around or to rally people around their thoughts about someone or something. And we all see this every single day. Just get on social media, or don't. But so the damage is being done. either consciously or subconsciously. Like I said, we live in the most mentally and emotionally unhealthy era that has ever existed. It's no secret that anxiety, depression are at astronomical levels in our society today. But what if we, as followers of Jesus, what if we could break that cycle? What if there was something that we can do to ensure that our kids don't continue to regress? So that society, people in the kingdom of God, don't continue to regress in the cycle where their thoughts run endlessly and there is no rest for their thoughts and no rest for their emotions. What if a group of a couple hundred people in this room in North Phoenix, we were able to change the trend and buck that trend? What if there was something that we can do about it? Well, I love this quote from Andrew Sullivan. He writes this. He says, "There are books to be read, landscapes to be walked, friends to be with, life to be fully lived. This new epidemic of distraction." And in context, he's talking about our habits and the voices that we hear constantly. This new epidemic of distraction is our civilization's-specific weakness. And its threat is not so much to our minds, even as they shape-shift under the pressure. The threat is to our souls, because as one thinks, that's how one is. At this rate, if the noise does not relent, we might forget we even have any. Like we might forget we even have a soul. Or in the words of Jesus in Mark chapter 8, verse 36, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? So for the next few minutes here, before we wrap up, I just want to look at a habit that can help rid ourselves of this epidemic of distraction, that can help us get to those strongholds in our minds that have taken some of us here captive, that we live in a world where our mind is spinning and our emotions are spinning out of control. So what does that look like? Well, one practice that I just want to share here today real quick is that of silence and solitude. Here's some examples from the life of Jesus. Mark chapter 1, verse 35. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, some of you get up in the morning when it's still dark now, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. He didn't get up, he didn't check his phone, he didn't hurry up and get ready for work and then go. Got up early in the morning, got off to a solitary place where he prayed. Here's another example, Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat. Do you ever feel that way? You're so busy, so consumed with stuff that you forget it's even lunchtime. It's like 2 o'clock. Oh my gosh, I forgot to even have lunch. Our minds are just consumed with stuff. So he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because it's Jesus. He's not like me. When I try to get away from people and they keep following me, I don't have that much compassion, but Jesus does. Because they were like sheep without a shepherd, so he began teaching them many things. Notice what happens later on in the story, in verse 45. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. Finally, he just tells the crowd, you're dismissed, leave. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. I love this. Jesus gets to a point in his life where he's like, enough is enough. Get away, silence, solitude. He even dismisses the crowd. It's like those times, have you ever had people to your house and it's like getting late and you just really want them to leave, but like you don't know what to say because you want to be nice, but you also want them to leave, okay? And it gets awkward, so then you're like passive aggressive and it's like, oh, what time is it? Oh, wow, okay. And they don't get the hint. So then you start like cleaning the kitchen, like putting everything away, and they still don't get the hint. Jesus is like, you're dismissed. He just like walks up. He's like, all right, see you guys later. And he goes off to a solitary place. I love this. He knows that he needs that time. and the time is spent away from all the noise in silence and solitude. And those are just a couple of examples of several throughout Scripture as well. He actually often withdrew. And what's odd to me is the more in demand that Jesus got, the more meetings or appointments he had and all that kind of stuff, the more he withdrew for some silence and solitude. Often, though, like when I get busy or when we get busy, the first thing to go is silence and solitude. Like, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy. I got appointments. I got work to do. I got stuff I need to do. I got to take my kids here. I don't have time for that. But to Jesus, the more in demand he was, the more busy he got, the more time he knew it was important to get away for some silence and solitude. Jesus is different. For him, it's I have a lot of work to do, so I better get off to a quiet place. So this was a pattern, a habit, and a practice in the life of Jesus. So two components to silence and solitude, and this is going to sound like no duh, but the first component to silence and solitude is simply silence. Where there's no noise, there's no talking, no voices, no distraction, no phone, no TV, no news, no nothing. Maybe it's a walk, maybe it's a bike ride, maybe it's a hike, maybe it's a whatever it is, but there's something magical about just silence. And we live in a culture that hates silence. And it's not all bad, but like when we leave here, we'll get in our car, we'll play music. We'll pull up somewhere. Often in the parking lot of where we pull up, there's going to be music playing. You're going to walk into a coffee shop or a store or a restaurant. Sound is going to be playing because we just get uncomfortable when there's silence. But there is something beautiful about just sitting in silence where there's no noise at all. The next part of silence and solitude is obviously solitude. It's where we go to decompress from the noise and the traffic in our minds and our souls that are not from God. It's where we go to slow down. It's where we confront our insecurity, our disappointments, our heartaches. It's where we turn out those untrue voices we get from media, culture, social media, family, sometimes our own minds, and tune into the voice of truth. It's where we get the right perspective on things. It's where we can access those strongholds that are in our minds and actually deal with them. But when we don't practice silence and solitude, we miss out on what matters most. Like, I don't know how many times I've consumed things that only contribute to more anger, more worry, more stress, and more anxiety, while I could have been spending time with my family. I could have spent that time with what helps contribute to my joy, that helps contribute to peace, but instead I'm consuming things that just damage my soul and damage my mind and leave me restless. See, silence and solitude puts us in a rhythm and a posture to do what James 1:19 says. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. But when we don't spend time in silence and solitude, sheesh, we are slow to listen, quick to speak, and quick to become angry and ticked off and anxious. See, we get emotionally, we feel exhausted, tired, weak. We get emotionally unhealthy and become reactionary. Small comments, weird text messages, different things that we see online, they just trigger us to the point where we lose it. We get defensive and we blow up, and those are just a few signs and symptoms of a life with and without silence and solitude. Here's this quote from Blaise Pascal. With a name like Blaise Pascal, you know this is going to be a good quote, so pay attention. He says, all the unhappiness and disappointment of men arises from one single fact. They cannot stay quietly in their own minds. See, when we can stay quiet in our own minds, when we have silence and solitude, it helps provide something that I think is very important. It helps us look underneath the surface and to really examine those strongholds that we have in our mind. See, I think all of us here, we probably typically want rest for our minds. We want to be emotionally healthy people. We want all of that kind of stuff. But the way we want to rest mentally is by having everyone else change, or by having situations changed. If this just stopped, if these people did that, then I would be at rest. If these people just believed everything I said, if these people were just convinced to know the things that I know, then I would be fine and I would be at rest. Then I would be okay. But we never want to sit in our own minds. We never want to listen. We never want to figure out what our own emotions and mind have to say about us. We never want to learn from our own emotions and then reevaluate how we operate. But silence and solitude forces us to slow down and look underneath the surface of our own thoughts. Here's another quote, this one from Pete Scazzaro from his book, The Emotionally Healthy Church. He says, in emotionally healthy churches, people take a deep, hard look inside their hearts, asking, what is going on that Jesus is trying to change? They understand that a person's life is like an iceberg with the vast majority of who we are lying deep beneath the surface. They invite God to bring to their awareness and to transform or change those beneath the surface layers that hinder them from becoming more like Christ. Wow. How true is that? You see, there's stuff underneath the surface that God is after that we haven't surrendered to him. And that stuff that's under the surface is really what needs to change. Like, I don't think God will heal our anxiety, our worry, our mental stuff until we're willing to listen to it and actually learn from it. There's a healthy maturity to step back and say, I am so angry right now. Why? I am so stressed out. Why is that? Why do I lash out at my kids and my spouse? Why? Why do I project my insecurities on the people around me? Why do I do that? See, I recently had to deal with this myself. I work at a job that, like my full-time job, it's a job that I like, it's a job that I enjoy, but it's a job that I want to be the best at. So I work endlessly and tirelessly. I want to be number one. And like the way that our job is set up, there's like metrics and there's things that you could see, like who's at the top, like who's the best, and I always want to see my name at the top. And I was talking to a coworker and just like telling him like how hard I work and how I want to be the best, and he's like, why? I was like, because I want to be the best. He's like, well, how come? It's like, because I do. Why do you not? I was like, I'm competitive. He's like, yeah, but why? I was like, dude, just stop. And he's like, I think that's something that you need to figure out. I said, I think you need to figure out some stuff, okay? And then the next day, I was actually on a walk for an hour, left my phone at home, no computer, had to get away from work and just decompress a little bit. I just was in silence and solitude. And when we do that, when there's nothing to look at, when there's nothing consumed, when there's nothing to listen to, you kind of get alone in your own thoughts, in your own mind, in your own heart, and you can't help but confront the underneath the surface stuff that is damaging your soul. And as I'm doing that, I'm thinking back to like, you know, why did this guy ask me, I need to find out why I want to be first, why I want to be the best? And it dawned on me. Throughout my life, sports that I've played, I've been pretty competitive. I've never been the best person on my team. I've always been like second best. Like I've been the best at some things that I don't really care about, but I really, like the things that I care about most, like playing basketball in high school and college, I wanted to be the best. And I was never the best player. I was close to the best, but never actually the best. Or like a group of buddies of mine, we play golf together like a couple times a year. They're from all over the country. They usually come here to play because it's awesome here. But out of that group of friends, I'm never the best. I want to be the best. And it drives me nuts that I'm not the best. Like, you don't want to play golf with me. It's bad. I'm usually a pretty chill, calm person, but not when I play golf, because I want to be the best. And then it dawned on me, too, like there's been people in my life that I've heard say things about me like, you're not really going to do great things. You're not going to do that great. Like, I don't know what kind of job that you're going to have someday. Or there's people that have directly told me, because the way that you're wired, your personality, there's just not, you just can't do great things. You're never going to be the best. And so now I'm living in a reaction to that, where I've turned like this thing into idolatry, where it is like the center of my heart, and it's like ruin some things, where I'll be at home, but I'm not really even at home sometimes. I'm working. And I think I have a son with special needs upstairs who needs my attention. I have an 18-year-old daughter who needs my attention. There are way more important things than me trying to be the best. And then as I'm walking home, I see my house like 100 yards away. And I think, what if I was the best dad in the world? What if I was the best husband? Maybe I could be the best at that. That's probably what's most important. And when we give a voice and hear ourselves, we might find that we're reacting to past trauma. Some of us here today, you might be modeling the reactions and the behaviors of your parents. The reality is all of us here are either a reaction to or a reflection of how we were brought up. All sorts of different, for good or bad. And our family has a massive weight, and past experiences have a massive weight on who we are today. There are things, perhaps some of you here today, that your parents have said or done or not said or not done that have massively impacted who you are today. Maybe it's something an aunt or an uncle said or did, or a grandparent said or did, or a mom or dad or something like that, or maybe you had a mom or dad die way too soon and you feel like it left a gap in your development as a human being. But what often happens, especially if your past is laced with pain, we look to other things to fill our emotional and our mental needs. We tend to medicate ourselves with codependent relationships and other things that are super unhealthy while all treating symptoms and not the root. Because we want so desperately to move forward, but the root of the issue is underneath the surface. See, whatever pain, whatever underneath the surface stuff is not transformed, it will be transferred. And if we're to break the cycle of mental unrest and things that are mentally unhealthy, if we don't transform that stuff in our own minds and our own soul, it's only going to be transferred. So to wrap up here today, a friend of mine texted me a couple weeks ago, and he said, hey, do you have time to chat this week? And it was a friend I hadn't talked to in like 4 years. He was one of my best friends at one time, known him for probably over 20 years. We were on staff together once at a church, and just randomly texted me, do you have time to talk this week? It's like, oh, great, you know. So I'm like, yeah, I do. So then we set a time to talk, and he calls me. And he says, hey, I just wanted to, we got through the, what have you been up to the last 4 years stuff first and did all of that. And then he says, so the reason I called is I was recently kind of on this 24-hour silence and solitude retreat where I just got away, no phone, no computer, nothing, and I just asked God to examine my heart and my soul. And he said, there was moments in my life where I need to ask you to forgive me for things that I've done. And so he's like sharing stuff, and I asked him, I said, where did this kind of all come from? And he said, well, I've realized when I've taken a deep look inside my heart and underneath the surface, there's things that I've been reacting to that have been unhealthy. He said, there were things that my dad said and that my dad did that I'm now reacting to that. There's been things in my past, things that have happened to me and things that have done and things that have people said to me, and now I react to that in an unhealthy way, and I just want to apologize to you for those things. And it just all started with some silence and solitude, he said. So here's what I think a takeaway could be for us. What if this week, maybe it was tomorrow, maybe it's even today, what if you just carved out 1 hour this week where you just got away, maybe went on a walk or a hike or a bike ride or something, no phone, no computer, no nothing, and just ask God to examine your heart, those underneath the surface things. Why am I triggered this way? Why does my mind go here? Why do I react this way? Why do I want everybody to think the way that I think? Why do I do this? And just begin to deal with those underneath the surface things. As we wrap up, here's what David had to say about this. In Psalm chapter 139, search me, God, know my heart. Test me and know my troubled thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting. Let's pray. God, we thank you that we can find rest for our souls, that by coming to you, we can find rest for our minds, that you could lead us in the way of everlasting, and that, Lord, you could help us to be the most healthy people that we can possibly be. God, we thank you that you want what's best for us, that you want to transform our minds and our hearts to test and approve your pleasing, restful, perfect will for us. For those of us here today that we feel like our minds and our thoughts spin out of control, God, we pray that you would help us, that you would form our thoughts, that as we do the hard work of looking underneath the surface of our heart and soul that you would transform those things where we can be simply more like you. In Jesus' name, amen.